Welcome to the Beyond Atheism podcast, with me, Nathan Alexander, and my co-host, Todd Tavares. This podcast moves beyond questions of God's existence to ask, what's next in a godless world? If you're enjoying the show so far, remember to like and subscribe, rate and review, and consider supporting us on Patreon. Beyond Atheism is produced and distributed by Atheist United Studios.
Today, we're joined by Srishti Hukku to discuss her service to the community of the University of Ottawa as a Humanist Chaplain. Srishti is a Kashmiri Canadian and currently the youngest accredited Humanist Chaplain in Canada. Her ties to humanism are deep and strong. She's a lifetime member of Humanist Canada, a Humanist officiant, and a supporter of the American Humanist Association, Humanist UK, Humanist Australia, and Humanists International. She holds a master's in public administration and is completing a joint PhD in population health and medical anthropology. As impressive as all this is, it's barely the tip of the iceberg. Srishti, welcome to Beyond Atheism.
Thank you so much, Todd and Nathan, for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here with the two of you tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Srishti, for coming on. Looking forward to talking with you. So just to get started, tell us, if you could, about your background. Were you raised religious?
Yeah, that's a great question. So where to begin? My family is Kashmiri by origin. Kashmir, for those listeners who don't know, is the most militarized place in the world, and has a long and sordid history of struggle with religion, religiosity, and how people want to share land based on those things. So both sides of my family are Kashmiri for 7 generations, as far as I know. And we grew up, my family is Brahmin Pandits, so grew up in a Hindu household with extended family that were Hindu. And a small part of my family is actually from Liberia, where my mom grew up. And that part is devoutly Christian. So an interesting mix, but yes, definitely coming from an extended family and a nuclear family that is practices, and is all composed of believers.
Mm. So when did humanism enter in? Was that something that you found yourself, or was it part of a family practice?
So, as I'm sure will come out over the course of this conversation, I can be pretty stubborn about things. And learning is one of the things that I'm most stubborn about. And that is a trait that my parents had to contend with from a very young age. So, we spent a lot of time, because I think in the Kashmiri tradition, in the Brahmin tradition, introspection, conversation, and specifically in my family, those are things that are really important. So we spent a lot of time around the dinner table talking about politics, religion, and I spent a lot of time listening to folks whenever there were, parties of the adults getting together. These are the things that were discussed. And so I was steeped in it from a very early age, and I was extremely curious. And I would say the biggest sort of turning point for me was when we moved from Delhi to California. So I landed in Silicon Valley at the tender age of 6. And that's where sort of, I would say, my love affair with secularism, humanism started. That's where I was exposed to this idea of a nation founded, at least in principle. We can argue about whether that's the practice now or not, but at least in principle, an entire nation founded on freedom from religious persecution. And you can imagine, given my background and my family history, why that was such a seductive idea. And so, I think I was probably 7 when I was demanding live translations of any service that we would go to at the temple. And soon thereafter, I was recused from responsibilities to attend. Because, I just wanted to know what was happening. I wanted to understand what I was part of. I wanted to make sure that I was endorsing the things that were being discussed. And so that's where the shift to irreligiosity really started. And I would say the decade following that, until I was in my late teens, early 20s, became more about specifically exploring all worldviews, trying to better understand the Quran, trying to better understand the Kitabi Aqdas from the Baha'i faith, trying to better understand Christianity, Judaism, all of the major world religions. And through that process, really not finding anything that fit for me until I went off. I was in my last year of high school in grade 12, and we took a epistemology course, or theory of knowledge. And I think that was when all the stars aligned for me. And I was like, wow, this is about how do we know? How do we know what we know? And from that to my first year in university is really when I started self-identifying as a humanist, a secular humanist.
Do you remember what you heard in Temple that I don't know, do you remember what they were talking about? Or was there a moment there where you were like, this is not for me?
Yeah, that's important. And I think as part of my story, what I failed to mention was, unfortunately, as someone who, although, my heritage is Kashmiri, we don't have access to the Kashmiri language. It's been an unfortunate loss of being, persecuted and removed as a result of religious genocide in that region. And so I don't speak Kashmiri, and my Hindi is quite poor. My French is better, so that's saying lots. So, unfortunately, I couldn't understand anything that was happening in Temple. The loss of, those languages made it extremely difficult. And most of the texts and most of the things that are being discussed are discussed in Sanskrit or in Hindi. And so it was completely inaccessible to me.
And then, so fast forward to, I guess, your first semester of college, where you learn about epistemology and theories of knowledge, I suppose. And this sends you down the road to humanism, which you already had a very tacit idea of humanism. It sounds like it's a very broad idea, but now you seem heavily invested in it. It's not something that we talk about in depth in the show very much. We talk about it very generally, but can you tell us more about what's meant by humanism? We get these very catch-all general terms. Whereas, is there a lot of, did it require much study? Are there concrete tenets of humanism? What do people need to know before they can say, okay, this is humanism, I am a humanist?
Yeah, so, part of the beauty of humanism is that it comes in so many different flavors. And that's something that I really appreciate. So I didn't get into the details of this, but what I saw when I was at university during Frosh Week was that there was an Indian Students Association, there was a American Students Association, there was a Hindu and another and I felt like, oh my goodness, this is a decade ago or more. And this was pre the idea of sort of intersectionality being so much in the consciousness and the public consciousness. And so I was in a place where I felt like, okay, what part of my identity is important? What part of my identity is going to decide the community that I want to affiliate with while I'm on campus? And nothing really fit until I went to the humanist table, and there was a big sign and it said secular humanism, we welcome everyone. And it was this sort of instant kinship with the nerds, and I say that with all due love, who were standing there. They were really passionate about human rights and equality, and they were compassionate. And all of a sudden, I felt like I could be my whole self. And so, that's not a technical definition of humanism, but I think that's an important piece of the context around what you're asking about humanism. So I think for me, humanism is really about being able to bring my whole self rather than having to pick and choose between different lived experiences, different identities that I hold within me, which is a really, complex mix, being a first generation immigrant living all over the world. And I want to add to that then that over the next few decades, I spent time with humanists, attending conferences, reading the humanist declarations that exist. And there is a minimum statement on humanism. And that's generally what most humanist organizations require folks to kind of sign off on in terms of becoming a member or becoming a humanist chaplain or becoming an officiant. There is a minimum agreed upon statement. And that statement really emphasizes a few key principles. So it emphasizes, a non-supernatural worldview. It emphasizes empathy, compassion, science, literature, creativity, I think all of the things that make humanity beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just to go back to your religious background, I wanted to ask if there's some like potential compatibility between Hinduism and humanism. I mean, for example, a few episodes ago, we talked with someone who's he's part of a humanistic Jewish congregation or whatever you might call it. And I wonder if there's something as similar with Hinduism, like are there humanistic Hindus?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that I've certainly been exploring personally to try and reconcile this idea of has my thought process been colonized because I've been primarily educated in the West? That's a really difficult question that I'm wrestling with and I continue to wrestle with. I would say the best resource that I've seen that answers that question is on the American Humanist Association website. And they have a whole pamphlet on what are the concordances between Hindu thought and humanist thought. And I think it would be really important for me to emphasize that a lot of people don't actually identify Hindu thought as a religion. I think oftentimes that's a Western sort of label that gets applied to a philosophy of a region, a worldview, and a worldview that I think has many different paths to kind of what I would consider the idea of enlightenment. And so, there are debates within humanism that are roaring as we get into this world of diversity, equity, and inclusion on where does humanism really start? And some people will tell you that humanism starts with the Renaissance, but I think contemporary belief is moving towards a much more inclusive idea. And that inclusive idea is no, actually, humanist thought started in India, it started in China. So as long as there have been people who have identified in religiosity, there have been people who have been irreligious. So in India, it's often referred to as the Charvaks. There's not a lot of their original text or writing that is left. So it's bits and pieces here and there. But yeah, I spent a lot of time studying humanism. I've taken courses. I've taken, master's level courses on humanism, both domestically in Canada, but also abroad. And so there is a lot of complexity to the worldview, and hopefully that doesn't intimidate anyone that's listening. It is actually an invitation to come and explore and read and learn about, all of the different ways that you can live a humanist life and live humanist values within the way that you want to live your life.
And that, I think we can move there to the idea of the chaplain, which seems to be the way that you've you've taken on humanism actively. Is that fair to say? That's where you most
It's
live as a
definitely,
humanist?
it's one of the ways, between that and the officiating. I think the two of them together are really an integral component of me being a humanist activist,
Right.
if you can say that, because I think having the officiating capacity helps with things that religion and religiosity, the ritualized components of life that are really important for folks. So birth, death, and sort of everything in between, whether that's marriage or partnership. So I think those two vehicles are and have been super powerful.
Mm. So I kind of know what an officiant does, although I can't say it right, apparently. I know I think I know what they do, but the idea of a chaplain is it's just alien to me. I know I've heard the term, we've talked about them in prisons and in the military. I don't really know what a chaplain does. I don't think many of our listeners do either. Could you illuminate us on this? What is the role of a chaplain, just in general? And what do they do on a college campus? That's when it gets really strange, because it's something I definitely missed at university. Without getting into the humanist part, which we'll save for a little bit later, what is a chaplain supposed to do?
So chaplaincy has really historically been the domain of religious folks. And essentially, chaplains are people that journey with you through the trials and tribulations of life. So historically, they have been part of the military. They've been part of educational institutions like Harvard, where they really help to ground people's experiences, lived experiences in, again, historically, in religious texts. So it's really about having someone who can journey with you as you're going through the ups and downs of life.
And so how did you get into being a chaplain? Was it something you'd always hoped to do, or you just or did it just kind of happen by accident?
Yeah. I don't know how to exactly answer that question. So I wear a lot of hats in life, and
Yes.
I
Mhm.
came across an opportunity, and I saw a report that was published by the Department of National Defense, and basically it outlined that a huge proportion of the organization was likely non-religious, and yet there was no non-religious practitioners to serve that population.
Mm-hmm.
And that
in the military?
in the Canadian military, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was your impetus.
That was my impetus, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. And so before that, I was always looking, from basically the time that I joined on campus, I was always involved in some or other human rights issue or activity. And looking even further back, that had started in high school with LGBTQ plus issues in Canada when same-sex marriage was being considered. I was, in grade 11 or 12. So those have been things that have been really important to me for a long time. And having that humanist affiliation helped me access different activities, be part of a community that was trying to do good outside of a religious framework. And so ultimately I saw this report and I identified this gap, and I put in an application. Back to that stubborn side of me, I put in an application and I said, well, let's see where this goes. I didn't have anything in the application that really conformed to my worldview. It was all around things like, are there parts of your religion that you don't agree with that would make it difficult for you to become, a chaplain, et cetera, et cetera. So it was very much tailored to religious folks. And so I applied anyways.
Right. Wait.
Yes.
Srishti,
Yes.
where is this application? Is this like just on the university website? You're
No,
going through their portal?
this is through the Canadian Armed Forces.
Oh, this is in the military. That's where it started.
That's where it started.
And you can do this as someone who is not in the military. This isn't a military
That's right.
position.
So I'm sure that people who I know who are going to listen to this podcast are going to be shocked because I didn't share this with too many folks. But yeah, I applied to become a Reg Force member of the Canadian Armed Forces.
So it would have required you to become a member of the military.
That's right.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So
see.
The job application or whatever, it was just for a chaplain in general.
That's right.
Not particularly humanist or any affiliation. You sort of thought like,
that's right,
you would go in and put a humanist spin on it or something.
That's exactly what I thought. I said,
yeah,
I have a decade of experience in public policy. I have a master's degree. I have an incredible amount of experience, coaching, mentoring, guiding. How are they going to turn me down?
Right? Yeah. How could they?
I am. Yeah. I'm female bodied. I'm racialized. Turn me down.
Yeah.
So.
And they did. What happened?
Well, they didn't. Todd. They didn't. They welcomed me with open arms. I was selected. Yeah, I was selected. It was a long journey to get there. It took like 3 or 4 years, but yeah, they accepted me. I was one of the top candidates that was selected in the entire country to become what they call a CELUM chaplain. So a chaplain that actually gets subsidized education in order to fulfill all of the requirements of the military. Wow. And I was ready to enroll. And then like 2 weeks before I was, I had like most of my bags packed and ready to go. I got a really gut-wrenching letter that said, "Oh, we reviewed your application. And by the way, we've realized you have a gluten allergy."
Didn't see that one coming, huh?
That's not okay.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And so all of a sudden, my life changed very quickly. I kind of had a 10-year plan of I'm going to join the Canadian Armed Forces. I'm going to become Canada's first military humanist chaplain. And it was gone as soon as it came, basically.
That's crazy.
It was crushing. There were a lot of tears.
Camp?
Sorry.
Were your bags packed for boot camp?
My bags were actually basically packed for what would have been my first semester at university to create essentially a program from scratch for humanist chaplaincy because one didn't exist at the time in Canada.
Wow.
Yeah.
And does it exist now?
We've done a lot of good work. So we have now a student at the University of Toronto who is the first humanist candidate in a otherwise religious program. So yeah, we've made some huge headway. We also have the first military humanist chaplain in place. So
wow.
Although I wasn't able to do those things, we found excellent candidates who were and are doing those things and making the dream a reality.
Right. Yeah. And do you let them know that it was supposed to be you? Yeah. No. It was me. I did this.
Yeah. Well,
you're the path breaker.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know about that, but I was and I continue to be part of their journeys, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. I hope that I can continue to be a resource for them. I was really grateful to meet folks as they were on their own journeys, trying to figure out, how they wanted to chart their careers, and it just worked out. And so I am grateful to have had a hand in selecting these folks and helping them advance.
Yes. Yeah.
Spoken with the elegance of a true humanist.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And so after that, then how did you are now the Humanist Chaplain at the University of Ottawa in Canada. And so how did you get into that?
Yeah. So once my plan fell apart, I as I said, there were a few tears, and then I regrouped and thought about where else I could lend my expertise. And I have spent a lot of time in school in a lot of different countries. Yeah. And so I thought, what better place than to provide my services? So I actually went on the University of Ottawa website, where I am currently a student as well, and thought, hey, here's another gap. So why not?
Perfect.
Why not fill it?
Yeah.
And so I applied, and they accepted me, and the rest is history, as they say, basically. So I've been working with the interfaith team, which is not a word that I love. Let's be honest. I don't love that F word.
Interfaith.
Yeah. The latter half, the inter part is fine.
Right.
Yes. The faith I find exclusive, which is an ongoing conversation with the folks at the University of Ottawa. I don't find it to be a inclusive nomenclature for students who don't have faith, and I think we want to be more inclusive. So anyways, I applied, they accepted me, and I've been seeing clients at the university since then.
So that leads me to a bunch of questions. The first being, was the application process the same as the military? Did it have the same questions, or did you think it was more accommodating to people who are humanists, like chaplains that would be of no faith?
So, I mean, the military application was extremely rigorous. I mean, I did multiple interviews. There were a battery of tests about, my health, alcohol consumption. I did a physical. I was getting up every morning to make sure I was, had my rucksack and carrying around 30 kilos to make sure I could get through basic.
And University of Ottawa didn't make you do that.
Yeah, not quite. They test me in other ways by making sure that I pass my thesis. So that's a whole other ball game. But so the process was completely different. We now have a humanist chaplain in Canada at a hospital as well. So the first milestone there. So each facility is very unique, and I've actually started looking at volunteering at another university also in town, Carleton University, and their application process is completely different. So every institution across the country is unique, and I think they're contending with how to evaluate us fairly in comparison to our religious counterparts.
Was your lack of faith ever an issue in the application process?
No, I'm undeniable, Todd.
I didn't want to make it personal. I was speaking about checking a box that has a religion next to it, but that doesn't come up when you apply for these.
No, I mean, because I am explicitly applying as a humanist chaplain. There is no. I'm not playing a game when I apply. I clearly outline that I am a humanist, and how my first question is, how can we make this work, rather than, why would you want to say no to me? So I don't focus on that. I say, what are the gaps in my, education, in my experience, etc., that would need to be filled in order to make this something that you could justify.
So there's no religious test, and it's not an explicitly religious position.
No, not at all. And I think the chaplains, I would say the chaplains that are most successful are the ones that can actually meet people where they are. So I've had religious folks come to me who are struggling with their religiosity. And my job is not to proselytize, it's to, empathize, and it's to give them an opportunity to see if our community is suitable, interesting, something that they'd like to know about. I think it's a space where hopefully they can feel comfortable sharing whatever struggle has brought them to my, virtual door. And I think, lastly, it's really about meeting the person where they are. I think chaplains that are not able to do that, as you can imagine, some chaplains have very strong views around things like abortion, have very strong views around things like trans identity. I think those chaplains struggle the most in contemporary society with contemporary issues.
And how do students find you? And what sort of things like are they seeking out usually when they come to you?
Yeah, so I was actually thinking back on this as I was prepping for our chat, and there's been some really fascinating variety in clients. So I've seen clients who are just new to the city, who don't know anybody, who haven't had an easy time making friends, who are lonely, isolated, missing their family, unsure kind of how university life is affecting them, their identity. So there's been a chunk of folks who I would say fall into that. And then I've been really lucky. I don't think other chaplains, humanist chaplains, have necessarily had this experience, but I've had lots of clients who have come to me about sexual and reproductive health issues. And I think given my research and my area of expertise, that's probably something that draws folks to me a bit more. So those struggling with coming out within a religious community, or sexual violence, abortion, infertility. I've seen kind of a whole host of things that university students are struggling with. And there's certainly been folks that are struggling with mental health issues, which I would say is out of my scope of practice. So dealing with things like self-harm while on campus, suicidal ideation, those are obviously huge problems. And I think there's a chunk of folks who are just struggling with deconversion. It's their first time sort of away and quote unquote free from sort of the pressures and expectations perhaps of the community that they grew up with. And so they're going through the process of learning about things through an academic lens, learning about the concept of evidence and how do you apply that to your life, and how do you apply that to things like ethical decision making. And that can be really difficult and destabilizing if it's not something that you've been exposed to before. So I would say that's kind of the breadth of things that I've dealt with. And I've had colleagues who have dealt with things like medical assistance in dying, which I think is such a privilege. We've had members who have reached out and said, hey, I'm going to go down this path, and you're as close to family as it's going to get for me, because my family is religious or doesn't believe in this approach or whatever. But this is my way to die with dignity. And so we've had colleagues that have facilitated those processes as well. Not the medical portion, obviously, but the being with someone as that's about to happen.
Right. So it can get pretty heavy. It's always very private, very personal, but
absolutely.
as deep as it needs to be. Absolutely.
Every conversation is confidential, and you can have very, light, easy conversation. There's somebody who's just like, what's humanism? Like, I've never heard that word before. Can you tell me about it? Like, is there a website? To then, I'm really struggling, and I'm having suicidal thoughts, and I don't know what to do. It is certainly a broad spectrum of the human experience.
Yeah. And so to keep this private, I'm curious now, it's like the space where the interactions actually happen. How much of it is virtual and done online, like the way we're doing this, and or are there like facilities on campus that allow like a sort of safe space that's private and protective that people can go to?
Yeah, so there are spaces on campus. I have to say, I'm an errant chaplain, unsurprisingly. I've never been to the spot on campus where students can actually go. So I host all of my office hours virtually, and then I'm always willing to meet students at a place of their choosing. Obviously not their private homes, because that comes with a whole host of ethical issues, but in a public place like a coffee shop, if that's something that they want to do, that is always something that I offer to clients, but it's primarily done virtually in my case. I know other colleagues have different experiences. Our military chaplain, for example, is very much boots on the ground with fellow military personnel and experiencing day-to-day life with them. But so much of what university life is or has been the last few years has been virtual, that I think having that option is super important, and has been super important through the pandemic.
Yeah. And then how do the students find you? Is there like a directory they go to? Do they get to choose which one they want? Do they want the humanist or the military guy?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few websites. So
really?
on the Humanist Canada website, we're listed. So any member or any individual who's just exploring the website can reach out through there. But then we also have a website under the mental health and wellness pillar of the University of Ottawa, where folks can reach out. So there is an entire sort of section dedicated to spirituality and wellness, and you can see all the faces of the lovely chaplains there and have your pick.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, on that note, I was gonna ask, like, do you hang out with the other chaplains, or like what is your relationship with them? Like, I know you mentioned earlier about not loving that interfaith kind of angle, but yeah, do you how do you get on with the other chaplains?
So I should be clear. I love the concept of people with different worldviews working together.
Mm-hmm.
I really
Yes.
want to make that clear. I do think that the word faith is exclusive, though, because obviously I don't have faith, and I take a lot of pride in not having faith. I consider that a key part of my identity is actually I don't have faith. I empirically test things. I look at the evidence, I read literature, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I just find some of the nomenclature, even around things like spirituality, can be limiting. I don't know that I personally would say that I'm a spiritual being, insofar as the word spirit kind of refers to some sort of like ambiguous, I don't even know the words to use, some sort of ambiguous kind of body that we're kind of deferring to, right? So I think these are very loaded words, and I think they obfuscate the human experience. And so my preference is really to talk about the 4 E's. So ethical, existential, emotional, and equity issues are things that when I work with my chaplaincy colleagues, those are the things that I try and focus on, less on scripture or the G word.
Right. Do you guys do often get together? Is it like
we do? Yeah, we have
parties, or
we have monthly meetings.
Okay, not parties necessarily, but
yes. Meetings. Yeah, they're pretty. It's a pretty serious, I would say, bunch of folks. So we will often talk about kind of what issues are coming up, how are students doing, are there things at a policy level that's really fun, at a university policy level that we can try and shape and influence. And of course, I always have the slightly different perspective of, well, let's not forget the atheists, let's not
Right.
forget the agnostics, let's not forget,
Yes.
the other free thinkers who don't adhere to this.
Yes.
So I try and insert us, which I think is a
That's
huge,
good. Yeah.
important part of, chaplaincy, humanist chaplaincy as an activist opportunity. I think it is for us to be in spaces that we're historically absent from.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I
definitely.
imagine there's a lot of professional overlap, though, being like all chaplaincy, if that's a word. There must be professional overlap. Like most of the perspective is the same. Is that true, or do you find that there's a wide variance between one to the next?
Can you clarify what you mean by professional overlap?
So, like, as a professional position, they must. I would assume, going into this, 50 minutes ago, I didn't know what a chaplain was. They must, right? Like, it's got to be like, look, we're here to help people in these particular ways, and this is the way we do it. And you're not going to vary too much from that, right? It's not psychiatry. It's not, I don't know, prison warden. It follows a code of conduct. Everyone is, do you all need accreditation of some sort?
We do, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So,
we're endorsed by our respective bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So
that accreditation comes from either like their church or
that's right,
an outside organization, not from the state or the university itself.
That's correct. Exactly.
Okay.
That would be a liability issue for the university. So they require that external accreditation. Right. And at Humanist Canada, we have a huge section on, ethical conduct and complaints, grievances. Those are things that I always offer to clients, but fortunately that's never been an issue. But we have a very rigorous process of checks and balances, because you are working as a very autonomous professional dealing with a potentially vulnerable population. And so I think that is super important. As you can imagine, I have never gone to see, as a client, a religious chaplain. So I cannot tell you exactly what happens in those rooms. But I suspect that there is a slightly different flavor. And I've heard from clients who have come to me after speaking to a religious chaplain that there is a slightly different approach.
Yes.
Because I am not, in principle, I don't hold doctrinal views in principle. And so I think the approach is fundamentally different. I don't have a position that I'm trying to perpetuate in the world on issues. If a client comes, so let's talk about one of my favorite topics, abortion. So if a client is coming to me and
the
saying,
funnest of topics,
yes, keeping it light here, is saying to me, I'm really struggling with abortion because of the worldview that I hold. What do you think? I'm not going to tell them, hey, your worldview is problematic, right? I would hope that other chaplains would not do that, but I can't say for sure. Well, what I can say for sure is that I can provide them with resources that are not crisis pregnancy centers, that are going to be coercive in their approach to dealing with someone who's struggling and trying to reconcile, whether they want to go through with an abortion or not. So I think that's where there might be a bit of difference. It's on some of those really contentious issues where humanist, atheist, agnostic, free thinkers generally tend to be a bit more flexible. So I bring that flexibility. Inherently, that flexibility is built into this worldview.
I just had one other question. It's sort of a two-part question. How long have you been a humanist chaplain at the university? And then, are there more issues that are coming up these nowadays versus when you started or whatever? I don't know if you sort of trends and what you're seeing, stuff like that.
Yeah, so the military chaplaincy thing falling apart didn't happen too long ago. So I've been a humanist chaplain at the university for a couple of years now. So I can't say I've had a very long trend analysis, but I've heard from other chaplains who've been at universities longer that they've seen the issues that people are struggling with evolve as more, for example, international students arrive on campus, or as we went into the pandemic and people were trying to deal with virtual learning, or from literally all over the world. I think the nature of issues has certainly evolved, and I'm very grateful that because of my research, I think I disproportionately amongst my colleagues kind of get requests around sexual and reproductive health issues, which I feel personally uniquely positioned to talk about. So those are certainly the ones that I tend to see more of, but I see the whole gambit of, just I'm new to town too. I'm struggling with a class. I can't get my essay done on time because I'm really stressed because of XYZ reason. And we kind of talk through those kinds of things. So I haven't seen in the last few years a huge shift in the nature of issues that students are dealing with, but they really do, I think, fit the 4 E's well. You can cut them up into those themes pretty easily.
All right. Nathan, you want to push this further? I could go for another hour easily, just learning the ins and outs. I would have a lot of questions about paperwork.
That sounds like fun.
That's, if you want, positions like this have to have accountability. They're always keeping track of this stuff. But with that out of the way, Srishti, this is the lightning round. It's called Can a True Atheist? It's simple yes or no questions, which you're allowed to elaborate on. You can say as much or as little as you like. Just remember, there's no wrong answers, but a lot of people will think so. With that in mind, Srishti, can a true atheist believe in God?
Yes, absolutely. Atheists we don't engage in mind control as much as some folks would like to believe. So you can certainly publicly claim to be an atheist and internally pray to God when you go to sleep at night or when you have a stomach ache. I think, yeah, absolutely. That's a real thing.
Do you think it happens much?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people really struggle with their identity. I think we undervalue this idea of folks that are questioning their identity at any point in time. And so, absolutely, I've seen people who are struggling with concepts of God, or what is now known as the spiritual but not religious community. I mean, what does that mean? People are contending, I think, all of the time with this concept. So yeah.
Now, this is something I've been super curious about. Have you counseled people? Have you met with people who are like, I'm an atheist, but I'm worried about gaining faith? People who think that they're losing their atheism. Does that ever happen?
Yes. Yeah, it does actually.
That's amazing.
So
interesting.
It was one of the most fascinating conversations that I've ever had. I had a client come to me and say, my parents were religious. I grew up atheist, and now I am feeling lost. I don't have a sense of community, and I look at my, fellow, I won't say what religion, but people of a specific religion gathering. I see them celebrating things, and I don't do that. I don't have those rituals. I don't have that grounding in community. What do you suggest? And I said, well, believe it or not, there are folks just like you all over the world. And, there are committees. Humanists love governance. So whether you want to join at the local level, so there's, the Humanist Ottawa, or you want to join at the provincial level, which is the Regional Association of Humanists, or you want to join at the national level or you want to join at the international level. You can make this a part of your identity and a part of your socialization practices as much as or as little as you want. So yes, there are certainly folks that are struggling with that. And I think they struggle with it more and more as they try and figure out how they're going to date or try and find partnerships, or they find that they're falling in love with someone who is religious, and how to reconcile those differences.
Can a true atheist pray?
Well, it depends on how you define prayer, Nathan. So
it's open to interpretation, I guess.
It is open to interpretation.
Yes.
So, atheists or humanists or folks that are secular will often talk about secular invocations. And I always ask the question, well, I understand that religious folks are invocating God, but who or what are you invocating? So yeah, absolutely. I think that there is something to be said for quote unquote atheist prayers. I had a big birthday earlier in the year, and I did a version of an atheist prayer. I could only explain it to my family as an atheist prayer because they did not understand what the need was for a ritual for someone who didn't believe. And I certainly didn't use the G word, but I made some commitments to myself, and I made some commitments to the broader community, which I consider all of humanity, about who I was going to be and who I wanted to be. And I think you could argue that in some ways, depending on how you define prayer, that could be, yes, atheists can pray.
I like it. Can a true atheist eat animals?
Wow.
Uh-oh. It's not a trick question.
This is the heavy one.
This is the weird thing.
Yes, I think there are lots of people that have, pretty religious views about this, and I don't consume a lot of animals or animal products, but I would be lying if I told you that I've never had kangaroo. So yes, I think a true atheist can have a variety of nutritional worldviews.
Okay. Yes. Can a true atheist believe life has meaning?
I think absolutely. I think absolutely a true atheist believes that life has meaning. And I think atheists are often very vocal about their beliefs because they do feel that life has meaning, and they organize and they are activists and they're fighting for justice all over the planet, whether for fellow non-believers or whether for the rights of members of other communities. So yeah, absolutely.
Can a true atheist be frightened of AI?
Can a true atheist be frightened of artificial intelligence?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Human beings are atheists, and human beings have all sorts of fears. I know on campus, probably every good academic is struggling with, what am I going to do with ChatGPT right now? And how am I going to integrate that into the curriculum? Or how do I teach people to think things through when AI can answer any question I can otherwise populate? So yeah, absolutely. I think fear is certainly something that atheists and all human beings have, and I think it's okay. It's not a bad thing.
Okay. Can a true atheist break a promise?
Yes, unfortunately. True atheists are mere mortals, and we do make mistakes. And I think the really good ones among us, which I think are most of my fellow people in this community, are able to acknowledge and and accept when they've made mistakes.
Yeah, that's key. And finally, can a true atheist reject the idea of human rights?
What do you think, Todd?
Oh, I think that's the only way you can cheat in this game. People use stalling tactics. We get that a lot. We get a lot of it depends what you mean by blah blah blah. But what do you mean? That's the where we draw the line.
So can a true atheist, what was the rest of the question? Human rights?
Reject the idea of human rights.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty sure I had a conversation with my psychotherapist about what is a right and is there such a thing as a quote unquote inherent human right. So I think coming from a part of the world where I've seen some really difficult situations and seen and lived life as a first generation immigrant, not having sort of access to all of the resources that I might have otherwise had. I think, yeah, absolutely. I think whether or not you believe in human rights, our access to them really depends on, unfortunately, the birth lottery. So, yeah.
Yeah, right. Sounds about right. Well, the good news is you passed. So we've got that. Man, this has been fantastic. Yeah. I've learned a lot.
Yeah. Srishti, do you have something to anything to plug in the final moments?
Yeah, absolutely. So many things. First and foremost, I wanted to thank everyone at Humanist Canada. I wanted to thank the members of the Humanist Canada Chaplaincy Committee, all the leaderships at Humanist Care in the UK, and my fellow humanist chaplains, both domestically and abroad, who I've had the privilege of working with and had the privilege of talking about some really difficult ideas. Thank you so much for your camaraderie. I also really wanted to thank all of my clients. If anyone ends up listening to this, thank you for trusting me. Thank you for trusting me with your story. I take those moments with so much, I handle those moments with so much care and so much gratitude that people trust me enough to come and talk to me about the things that are going on in their lives. And I did want to acknowledge a few different things that I've been working on. So there should be a chapter about the humanist chaplaincy journey in Canada coming out in the next few months. I hope it's with the editor. So we're trying to get that book finalized. And another one of my colleagues, Martin Shoemaker, Dr. Marty, is also working on a book, and I'm hoping to contribute a little bit to that. And I think the only other thing I wanted to mention was to encourage folks that if they have any questions or anything about anything that I've said, reach out to me through my website, shristihukku.ca, or check me out on my officiating pages at 613weds.com.
Sounds great. That's a lot of work. Keep up the excellent work, Srishti. Yeah. It's fantastic talking to you today.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Nathan. Thank you for having me.
Okay, that was Srishti Hukku. Really great chatting with Srishti about her work as a humanist chaplain. Todd, what did you kind of take away from that conversation?
Where to begin with this? She does a lot. It's such a long road, but you know what it started with, and this is, I think, it speaks to what we've kind of recognized that a lot of atheists do, and where atheists are how we're kind of winning is that someone identifies a need, right? And then just applies to fill that need, right? People recognize what's needed and do it, basically. And to recap what she said about it, she read a report about what the military needed. They needed chaplains to serve people who were not religious, and she applied. And that's 50% of the battle right there. Apparently, it took a long time, and other people came in, but like that's all it takes, right? We address real needs that people have, and it certainly speaks to what she's been doing at the University of Ottawa, and to the students and community there, for the people there. And I mean, to build off that, I don't know if there's anything. Was there anything in particular that you wanted to address, Nathan?
Not in particular, but just going off your point. I mean, I think, I think there's definitely a need, and it seems like, having like a single humanist chaplain probably isn't enough, even that, given the numbers of non-religious people, there should really be many humanist chaplains. It shouldn't just be like a very niche position or something like that. I mean, especially going forward as the religious affiliation continues to decline, it'll just become that much more necessary, having people who can speak to people in, as they go through challenging times or whatever, and not coming from a religious perspective.
Right.
It's important.
Or getting out of a religion. And one of the things that we notice, especially if you listen to the extra material, if you're a patron, if you join us and support the link below, you get access to additional conversations. And in that, one of the things that she makes it really seem like a lot of it is undoing religious harm. That's one of the things that atheists need to be thinking about, humanists need to be thinking about. And that this is kind of one of the things that made me think is it's a bit of an insurgent position, right? Like, I don't really know much about a chaplain, but it sounds a lot like it's either religion colonizing a certain area, or state apparatus using religion to do something it doesn't want to have to do itself, right? In the military, certainly. I'm sure both of those are at work. But this is a case where, if religion is going to carve this space out, we can just take it back. If we're going to replace religion in a broad social context, you have to do it in these specific social contexts. And this is certainly one. And I mean, what she's talking about is like, this is a secular position. It ought to be done based on principles of humanism, right? That we live in this world. It's not supernatural. We need to take care of each other. And we're not going to be burdened by supernatural guilt. We're not going to be burdened by these, a sky tyrant. So, this is just another way of seeing like it's not just that atheism is taking over. It's not just that secularism is growing socially. It's that it is taking over institutions. It's finding ways in. And I think that's super important. That to me is a huge takeaway, especially since one of the things Srishti shows is that it's not impossible to do, right? Like, she's qualified for it. This is what she is qualified for. Not everyone is qualified for this. When you find the thing that you are qualified for, realize that you can do it. And that's a very, very important lesson for us for what comes beyond atheism, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting thing about her story, is that she saw this need and then she went and tried to fill it. And that was like, it wasn't like, like, okay, there's not a humanist chaplain. Like, okay, that's a shame. It's, she's like, well, I'll just be that humanist chaplain. And I think that's encouraging too. If someone is interested in helping out, I'm not sure, like, what all the qualification process is. Obviously there is a process to it, but I mean, I think it's something if people are interested, it's definitely something to look into. And I think it's, taking that kind of active step and kind of like, creating filling the need and so on, I think is important to do if you're interested.
Yeah. And I mean, and one of the things is that, like, she was expecting, I can project it. I was definitely expecting at that point in the story, right? Like, that she applies to the military and It's like, oh, wait a minute, what religion do you go to? Can we get a letter from your temple, right? Like, we need some background on this. And instead, it's like, oh, can you carry a heavy backpack? That's what they wanted to know. That's what matters. Because it's I mean, to the military's credit, like, they've recognized they have secular. Hey, how about this? There are atheists in foxholes, and that they need a way to be able to aid them in simple ways through their chaplaincy. So yeah, it's not that it's people apply and get, glances and second guesses and concerns because they're humanists. It's that they're wanted because they're humanists, which is a surprise, right? That.
Yeah. I think it's it really sucks. The gluten allergy was the ultimate undoing. Doesn't make any sense to me that they might have asked this earlier in the process. But
I know. It could be. I know that could be a way, the way they found to
I don't
not
know.
have her.
I mean,
But
I guess they already
kind of makes sense.
They have another one now. Who I guess does
not have a gluten allergy.
No, because I don't know. I mean, eating a lot of bread and stuff like that's important. I guess it's important.
Yeah, you don't want to, when you're like trying to get your troops to the front line and trying to get them to fight. You don't want to have to make 50 separate lunches for everybody. Separate the gluten. Right. That's too much. Looking out for those who's got celiacs, who's lactose intolerant. Yeah, these things, they're just, can't you just give everybody the same meal?
Yeah. Right.
That's the thing that matters.
Yeah.
It's not humanism.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, and it kind of, especially, this makes a lot of sense too. Not a lot of sense, but the idea of, becoming humanist chaplains, having more humanist chaplains as a kind of free service on campus. It also makes sense looking at things like Russia right now, where we know they are mobilizing support through the churches, right? Like, Putin has his bishop, right? And like, you have to have someone, a religious leader, sort of sacralize or sanctify the military endeavor and use this whole angle. Like, that's something humanists are against. It's something atheists would be against, right? Like, why are you having religious leadership tell people they need to go to a stupid war? And this cuts that cord, and it's so important in that sense.
Yeah, that would be good if the humanist chaplains in the military spoke out in the future, if it came to it, that they could speak out against this sort of thing.
Yeah, but not even speak out against it, just not speak on behalf of it.
Yeah, that's right. That's another thing. Yeah, you're right.
Right.
You're
and
right.
Which is, the point, and as Srishti said about, like, when she is in, I don't want to call it counseling, but when she's talking with people, it's not about proselytizing. It's not, I mean, there's nothing to really proselytize to, right? It's not about condemning them. It's not about dogma or following spiritual laws or religious laws or traditional laws. It's just about getting someone to a better place. And, religion can do that, but they also have that baggage. So this is something where it gets rid of that baggage and, again, leads us down this path to greater individual liberation. Oh yeah. So I mean, and she's a super impressive person. You're lucky to have her on campus.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So whenever you got problems, Nathan, you know who to call now.
No, I will. Yeah.
Did you know you had chaplains on campus?
No, I didn't know that. There are many things. That I mean, it was. Yeah, I didn't realize there were chaplains or humanist chaplains. But yeah.
Right. I know. Double surprise.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yep. All right.
So
we'll include links below for more about Srishti, more about how to become a humanist chaplain.
Yeah.
And make sure to check those out.
Definitely. Good stuff.
So, we just wanted to thank the audience for listening. Thank you to the Patreon supporters for your support.
Yes. Big ups. Thank you, guys. And that's about Nathan, I am continuing my quest to stay off social media. I managed to do it again in the past couple of weeks. How about you? You got anything going on that you need to plug?
No, I'm still on Twitter, sort of. The only thing I post on Twitter is notices about our new episodes, but yeah, you can find me there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, any complaints, go to Nath G. Alexander on the
Yes.
Twitter.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, big ups all our you guys listening, supporters. If you're new, if you're just catching this for the first time, or you don't have money you want to throw us, like and subscribe. That's a big help. We really appreciate it. We love hearing from you at Nath G. Alexander on the Twitters. And that's all for now. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.